Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join me for this session for Dissertation Day. The topic is overcoming writing blocks in your academic writing. And, I just want you to know that this meeting is being recorded. The breakout sessions will not be recorded. And so I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that in case you have any issues with that. So, I also would invite you to please gather some supplies, either some scratch paper and a pen that you have nearby for a few simple writing exercises that I will lead you through, or you can use, of course, your desktop or laptop computer with a blank document open. But I would ask that you set that up now so that when we are ready to do some small exercises to help you start to unpack what writer's block is and how to overcome it, that you have that ready. Additionally, for this Zoom environment, I would ask that if a question comes up for you while I'm giving the presentation, go ahead and add that to the chat. I can't promise that I will see it in the flow of my presentation, but I will, after the presentation is over, I will go back and read through the questions to make sure that I've addressed any that you have. So go ahead and just put those in the chat as soon as they come up. You don't have to wait, but I'm just saying I may wait until the end to go back and address that. And then lastly, because this is an opportunity that's offered through grad pathways, it's very helpful to them to have metrics on what worked for you, what didn't work, how this presentation can be improved. So I welcome your feedback, and the link is there in case you have to leave early. I'm hoping that you can, and actually I'm just gonna add that to the chat now. Let's see, did that come through? First technical, let's see. Okay, so that's the link to the evaluation. Again, that's for the end, but just in case you need to leave early, I would appreciate it if you would take the time to complete that. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse the view there so that I can see. So, and again, please let me know in the chat if something comes up. I'll try to keep an eye on that as everyone does, when you're engaged and you're also trying to multitask in the true sense of the word. Okay, so you can see the ball and chain in my image. I really feel a lot of empathy for graduate students who are engaged in the long and somewhat baffling process of attempting to complete a doctoral degree or a master's degree. And this is where I will tell you a little bit about myself, about how I ended up here. Well, I finished my PhD at UC Davis in 2004. And that process, you would think, for someone who is trained as a writer, my PhD was in English literature. And so trained as a writer, you would think, well, it would be no big deal. It would be easy for someone who knows how to write and whose focus is really about language, literature, the structure of words, the cadence of words, all of that. You'd think, oh, it must have been a piece of cake. Well, I'm here to confess that it was not easy. In fact, it was very painful. And if I had known then what I know now and what I'm offering you today, it would have been much smoother. So the picture, look, mommy, I finished my dissertation, is to show you one way that I was able to harness what I needed to finish. And it was the motivation. It was the strength of wanting to finish that really pushed me through. And when I was laboring on my dissertation, had papers, this was, well before many of the organizing devices that are available through digital means. I had papers all over the place. I had notes, I had 3x5 cards. I had all kinds of information that I was grappling with. And I also had a very small toddler. And my toddler saw me grappling with all this and heard a lot about this thing called a dissertation, because that's what I would work on when I was not with my child. And my husband was helping me, supporting me by taking care of my child. So the day that he was 4 by the time this happened, the day that he came in with a pile of papers, mishmashed, kind of like this, and took a stapler and stapled it together and said, "Look, Mommy, I finished my dissertation," was a wake-up call for me. And that's what sent me to the other side. Now, again, had I known then what I know now and what I want to share with you today, I think it would have been a much easier ride. So you're in the right place. I also want you to know that I've been teaching at UC Davis in the writing program for 15 years. And across that time, I've asked a lot of questions. I improved my materials by seeing where people trip up. Why do so many people think that grammar is the most important thing in their writing? Why do people procrastinate? Those kinds of questions came up for me again and again. And so across those 15 years, I've researched and implemented methods that help writers to finish what they start. So that's my goal, and that's how I fell into consulting on helping academics, both graduate students and faculty, as well as other kinds of writers, to get through their process. So today's topic is about writer's block. And so this is an overview of what I will cover. And the way that writer's block operates or limits you may have some surprises, because it's not just about the writing. But let's start with a definition of what writer's block is. And so this is a definition from a person who has Mike Rose, a person who is a well-known and well-respected composition theorist. And so he's looked at writing for decades. And so he's an expert in the field. But anyway, this is the basic definition. Writer's block is an inability to begin or to continue writing for reasons other than a lack of basic skill or commitment. So again, when I said that I had the skill to write, so it's not about skill. And if you are in a master's degree program or a PhD program, you have the skill to write. So if you are concerned that you don't have enough language skills, if you are an international student, you may have gaps in your ability to deliver strong English sentences, but you don't have gaps in your thinking. And the thinking and mobilizing that is what will help you. So again, if you are a multilingual learner, or English is not your first language, don't despair. You can do this. Okay, so blocking is not simply measured by the passage of time. For writers often spend productive time toying with the ideas without putting pen to paper, but it's marked by the passage of time with limited productive involvement in the writing task. Okay, so that's kind of an outset of what writer's block is. And then when we think about what it causes, it's kind of a vicious cycle, because you can have feelings of anxiety, frustration, anger, and confusion. Those are some of the common ones. Another one would be shame. So what causes writer's block? Well, in academic circles, which is, or in academic contexts, like writing a dissertation or producing a master's thesis, I define it this way. It's the inability to produce sufficient or quality written work that meets your expectations, your advisor's expectations, or somebody else's expectations. Expectations are premature resentment because they set out an unhealthy standard for what's needed. So here are some other symptoms of writer's block. And these are the things that show that you're blocked. And you're probably like, yes, Wrye, I understand. I am blocked. But go ahead and take a look at this list and jot down on your note paper, or take note of which ones you identify with. Do you feel like you are actively avoiding the writing? And I call this active procrastination. It's when you create things that you need to do to justify why you're not doing the writing. Okay. And so and that can look it's a very sneaky way of delaying the writing. Doing more research is one way that people do that, believing that they don't have enough research. Or another common one in the sciences, and especially now with COVID, I imagine, is the issue of not having completed your field work, or you haven't collected all the data. So those are reasons that people often feel prevent them from writing. And you'll come to see from this presentation that that's not necessarily true. There are ways to begin the writing that get you going so that when the data comes in, you have what you need to really roll with that. Other symptoms might be overcommitting yourself in areas where it's just not productive. So I'm sure you've already heard advisors or fellow graduate students say, learn the power of no. Say no to things that are robbing you of the precious time to complete the writing segment. Okay, so so some of these are practical aspects to the task, and then others are really more about the feelings or the behaviors. So so again, thinking about your own expectations for you, just jot down on your paper, what do you expect for your dissertation? In other words, what do you expect it to look like? What do they expect? So when I say they, I mean whoever those other people who you feel are your readers or your audience. Who are you worried about? Who is going to read it? And so just take a few minutes, and I'm going to set a timer for just 2 minutes, and I'll be quiet for those 2 minutes so that you can concentrate. And again, I'm inviting you to think about how you avoid the writing, or what you do instead of writing, and then what are your expectations for that major piece of writing? Okay, so that's I hope that helped you to kind of get in writing what it is that you are concerned about. And the interesting thing is that when you start to unpack your expectations and compare that with your perception, your belief of what your audience's expectations are, then you can start to see there's a little bit of space to leverage, because the reality is that your audience, you may think of your audience as the world, And you may also think of your audience as your committee, which is true, but you may misread what their expectations are. And so one way to check in with how you are perceiving the task is to maintain closer communication with your committee. And that sounds counterintuitive, because if you're concerned and you feel a certain concern, you're blocked in your writing, you're unable to advance, it may feel like the best thing is to just go away. But in fact, facing that fear and asking your committee for what their expectations are is a great way to lessen that. And so what I'm trying to get to right now is I'm trying to encourage you to explore the feelings that you have. What are those fundamental feelings? Because once you get at and can recognize and acknowledge that you are feeling ashamed, or that you are feeling afraid of your audience, then that's empowering. Because once you identify the symptoms, you can start to address the causes. And so one of the ways that I address the causes of writing blocks is really through the psychology of writing. How you feel about your project will affect what you think about it. And then that in turn cascades into how you behave about it. So if you're feeling positive, energized, it's easy, right? You can, kind of keep going. But unfortunately, if you don't know the statistics of, graduate students and depression and anxiety, I do. And, it's kind of daunting, especially when you compare it with other options. And by that, I mean, people who have, who are out in the work world and who are not in an academic setting where it's just kind of continuous unknowns, they tend to have better mental health. But I'm going to address that in a different presentation. So I'm not going to go into that now. But what we're going for is we're trying to encourage the healthy thoughts. So what are your core beliefs about your ability to finish? If any of these look familiar, then, feeling that you're not good enough, or feeling that you need to, that you need to have more time, those are kinds of debilitating beliefs that contribute to writer's block. So I know you're probably going, okay, I get it, I'm blocked. Well, let's talk about strategies. Because I asked you about your expectations, the reason for that is to say, okay, I've got my expectations and they're up here. I want to produce the best dissertation on my specialized topic in this field. It's going to be earth-shattering. It's going to be on the nightly news. It's going to be picked up by every major publication in the world. So that's hyperbole. And of course, maybe your goals are more modest. That's great. But what I'm here to say is that a dissertation is an emerging scholar's writing project. Yes, you are specializing in a particular field. And the more you know, the more anxiety producing that can be, because you see how vast and how deep knowledge runs. So don't let that disempower you. Let that motivate you and encourage you on your path, and be pragmatic. What is a good enough dissertation in your field? That's different from what is a good dissertation in your field. A colleague of mine who's no longer with the writing program, John Stenzel, would say ABD is all but done, and a good dissertation is a done dissertation. So a good dissertation is done. So in thinking about what works in your field, I would like to give you a chance to talk to some other people who are attending this session. And I'm going to ask you to take 2 to 3 minutes each. I'll give you 10 minutes to briefly state what degree program you're in, and then also what do you think, or what qualifies as a good dissertation in your field, and what might be just good enough. And so it's a chance for you to talk about some of your expectations, and also to hear from other graduate students, just, quick, it's not that long, just 2 to 3 minutes each. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set up the breakout sessions. It'll take me just 1 second. And Teresa, if you can pause the recording, if you are there. Yes, it looks like we're good to go with the breakout rooms. So I hope that was helpful to you to speak with a couple other students who are also working on their dissertation or their master's degree, and and really, people can be at any point in the, sorry, my alarm was going off. People can be at any point in the process, and if you're early on in your process and you're facing some blocks, that's actually a good thing if you're here for that reason, because it is possible to intervene. And again, one of the main ways that you can reconceptualize the task at hand is what is good enough. And instead of going with the behaviors that got you into graduate school, which are superlative excellence, an attention to detail, a kind of A student behaviors, I would call them. Try to think about what's a B grade dissertation. And I am not saying this to lower the bar. I'm saying that this is a strategy, this is a way that you can manage the practical obstacles that you face in your dissertation by recognizing that intellectually you're totally capable. You probably know enough. And so you know enough about your topic, definitely, to start. And even if you're early on in your process. So that's one main thing to think about, how to manage writer's block, which is don't wait, okay? But you may not know how to do it. So before we talk about the how, like the practical, Wrye, what do I do? Wrye, how do I do this? I just want to, again, give a head nod to 2 different sets of problems. So there's the practical side of things, and then there's the psychological side of things. And so some of the practical obstacles are a lack of planning. And this is a little plug for my next session, which is the managing large projects. And I'll talk about planning for large projects and how you can simplify that task. Then there is ignorance of the writing process. And by ignorance of the writing process, I'm not saying that you're incapable of writing. I'm saying you may not know some of the specialized ways to break down a project. And if you attended the plenary sessions this morning, you probably heard about beginning with the end in mind. And that's helpful. That puts you on with the goal in mind. But by breaking down that process, you really do limit the amount of the number of obstacles, practical obstacles, that will get in your way. Okay, so again, these are some of the practical obstacles. And I mentioned earlier for multilingual students that you may have gaps in the conventions of English, but that certainly doesn't prevent you from writing. And so one of the ways that you can not worry about the quality of your writing is to start to think about it as a draft, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So just be aware that there are practical obstacles, and they require practical steps addressing what that fear or what that concern is head on. But as I stated earlier, most of the obstacles to writing are psychological. Unfortunately, it's like a domino effect. And as I said, a vicious cycle. One thing leads to another, and then before you know it, it seems overwhelming. So if you are feeling any of these kinds of self-criticism or fear of judgment, rather than just letting that free-floating anxiety sit there or thinking that the solution is outside of you, it may not be. It may be enough to become acutely aware of that, and then to take steps, perhaps with a mental health guide, with someone who's a therapist to help you work through it. But if you go in having already identified not just, oh, I'm feeling anxious, but I'm feeling anxious because I'm concerned about the audience of judges for my dissertation, that's a manageable project for a therapist to work with in an hour session, I would guess. I know a lot of therapists, so I know how they work. And if you can go in with a clear sense of what you believe is the psychological impediment, the block to your productivity, that can help. So, but this is not a deficit model. I'm not saying, oh, poor graduate students, you're all suffering. Well, you may be suffering, but you also have the tools. You have the practical tools, and you have the awareness tools that can help you to resolve some of these. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you in the chat. I'm going to put the link in the chat to this inventory handout. And so this is a way for you to answer a few questions, and you can just make a copy of that, and you should be able to answer them. Yeah, you might want to, it's an unprotected document, so don't just start writing in this. Please create a copy for yourself. So use make a copy, and that way you can write in your own version. So if you do make a copy, it will help you to do that, or cut and paste. Yeah. So in these instructions, I ask you to think about what is holding you back in practical terms. And so some of these questions you may not be able to answer right now. And let me just go into different, let's see, I'm going to make a copy. So I've got a clean copy. Okay, so some of these questions you may not know the answers to today, and that's okay. You don't need to fill this in. This is for your use. It's not for me. It's to help you. So what is the average time in your discipline to complete your advanced degree? Now, you may already know this, but if you don't, there's a link in this handout that leads you to a recent report by the UCs on average time to completion and things of that sort. So you can get a sense of what's expected in your discipline, because the worst thing would be to compare yourself to another graduate student who started later than you and is already finishing. And, there's this whole game of comparison. And I wish that humans didn't work that way, but that tends to be a way that we establish we gauge our success, is by looking at someone else. And so that's a practical thing. If you can know what's the average time, and then also by what date or year must you file. And again, this may have been covered in the plenary session, beginning with the end in mind. I have a link to preparing and filing your dissertation or thesis at UC Davis. So that's another way that you can look at what the final phase is going to look like. That can in itself be a practical way that you leverage a little bit of motivation. So if you haven't looked at that yet, if you're early on in your process, or if you're still in the data collection phase, I still recommend that you take the time to step back and think about some of the completion milestones that will help you to plan to again overcome the writer's block that might limit you along the way. The second thing, if you are actively writing your dissertation or thesis, when do you write? How often do you write? And how long at one session? Now we're getting into questions that professional writers and also writing instructors know are the fundamentals to being productive. When do you write? Is there a best time for you? And so choosing that time carefully and protecting it fiercely are two ways that you can put in place support that will prevent you from getting blocked. How often do you write? That's momentum. If you only write once a week, that's not, you're going to feel blocked because there's not enough momentum keeping it going. How long at one session? Shorter sessions tend to be more productive, particularly when they are punctuated with activities that support your mental or physical well-being outside of your brain. And by that, I mean, don't do something that's more work. It's really productive to step away, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, step outside and listen to the quiet. Those kinds of shifts really make you more productive. So graduate students tend to think, oh, I need a large block of time. And by block, I mean a space or a large number of hours. And once you've got the momentum, sure, but not if you are feeling blocked. If you are feeling blocked, it's really much better to start with small increments. All right, so I'm going to stop talking about these questions and just give you 5 minutes to kind of scroll through them, answer those that you feel compelled to answer now, and just know that these are available to you for later. Okay, well, I hope that taking a pause like that was helpful to you. And there's two questions at the end of your sheet that I really want to focus in on. And they are the questions, you know, in particular this question: what will be the biggest benefit from completing your dissertation? This is an important question because it's motivational. And what I would like to do now is lead you in what's called a focused free writing exercise. And it's one of the ways that writers get around writer's block under pretty much any conditions. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to turn on a timer, and this one actually has some nice soothing music. So if you don't like music, then you'll probably want to turn off your sound. But I'm going to ask you to write without worrying about what comes out. That's the first thing. The second thing is don't correct anything that you write. So write without stopping, and it's going to feel like a long time. 5 minutes can feel like a long time on one question, but it's important that you stick to the writing. So even if you have nothing to say, push through that. Either ask yourself the question again, what is the biggest benefit from completing your dissertation? And yes, you could maybe answer that in one sentence and then you're done. But what I'm asking you to do is to unpack what comes up. So rather than the biggest benefit to completing my dissertation is that I could get a job, then what would that job look like? Start imagining that. Or you know, whatever it is that you feel would be the biggest benefit to you personally or professionally. It could be either. But the important thing is to keep writing. So do not worry about grammar. Do not worry about complete or incomplete sentences. And certainly do not go back to correct anything that you're writing. No spell check. You know, just keep going forward. All right. So I'm going to play the music. And again, if that doesn't appeal to you, please feel free to, you know, to mute it. So 5 minutes. I hope that was helpful to you, just in seeing how you can approach writing differently. It doesn't always have to be thought through in any direct way. And there are different kinds of writing, different ways of writing, and these can support you in overcoming blocks. So what I've just, I've just shown you, or what I've just invited you to experience, is called focused free writing. Now, you may be familiar with the term free writing, and free writing gets a bad rap. I'm going to go to this slide first. So free writing, typically people think, well, that's just saying whatever comes to mind. And I did say keep going. But the difference with focused free writing, and this is the key connection with your dissertation or master's thesis writing, the key difference is that focused free writing relies on a carefully crafted or carefully thought of question. It's a way of leveraging your thinking. It's also a way of extending or developing a drafted chapter. If you don't know how two ideas connect, or you're having difficulty breaking through to what you want to say about it, rather than just kind of trying to write and sitting in front of your computer for hours on end, if you go for a walk and think about what is the one question that's at issue here, and then write that question down at the top of a blank sheet of paper, a separate, get out of whatever the document is that you're working on. Use a separate piece of paper and write without censorship, without an agenda for solving the problem. You're writing to explore, what do you already know? And as I said previously, most of you know enough to write your dissertation. I say most because if you're at the beginning of your program and you're still taking coursework, there's a different set of expectations for that phase. Nonetheless, you could be extracting what is important in what you're reading by using focused free writing. So you could begin to compile a set of documents that are answering specific questions that you draw out from the reading that you're doing. So that's for early phase. But for those of you who are in the writing phases, or you're still in data collection, focused free writing is an excellent way to ground yourself in the topic, but without expecting what you write during that session to suddenly be cut and pasted into your dissertation. So it's a different kind of writing, but it helps you to get beyond the blocks to your thinking, to your ideas. The focused free writing that I just had you do had an ulterior motive, because you'll recall, again, I've said you've got these motivational factors that can be the driving force that push you towards your goals. So that's why I wanted you to access some of your best ideas about what motivates you to finish. Writing as a process. If you don't know that by now from dissertation day, then, you know, I guess you've only had the morning sessions. This is the first set of sessions, but all of us share this, this mantra, which is there's a process to writing. The process, this is just part of it. I'm I'm just showing you this slide, which begins to break it down. And I have this handout for you to provide at the end of the presentation. But you can see that I break it down, and I call that first phase pre-writing. Some people call it brainstorming. Some people call it idea generating. The main thing to think about is it's a way to start writing before you even are actually writing the thing that you're working on. And you'll notice that focused free writing in response to a question is one of the options. Another helpful option, if you're just trying to generate ideas and you don't really need to worry about structuring them yet, would be listing. The worst pre-writing, in my opinion, for large, complex projects would be outlining if you don't have the full picture. So an outline is really helpful for shorter documents. It's helpful if you know what all the data sets are, if you know what all the chapters are going to be. But if things are going to change, setting yourself up with an outline can actually kind of inhibit you. There's something called a reverse outline, which comes into play in this revision phase. And that's a helpful way to outline what you've already written so that you see what's missing, how to restructure it, how to organize it. So those are some other things that come up. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that writing is a process, and it's a process that you can learn. It's not rocket science, okay? I have no illusion that the complexity of writing matches the complexity of what many of you are working on in subject area specialization. That said, writing is a specialization, and I've devoted 15 years of my life to figuring it out. So these handouts are the result of 15 years. And sure, there's probably still some things that could be improved, but what I'm saying is I've broken down that process for you, and the handout that I will provide for you at the end should help you to see what that looks like. Okay, so the next question to ask yourself, and you probably already have been toying with this as I've been talking, is where are you? Let's see, excuse me just one second, I'm trying to get these materials out of the way. Where are you in your writing process for the dissertation? So if you're still in the data collection phase, then certainly you're in this pre-writing phase. If you are still reading, taking courses, then you're in the pre-writing phase. So the issue, though, is that you do not have to wait to write. You do a different kind of writing. So that would be called pre-writing. Drafting applies to when you're beginning to put your ideas into chapters. Maybe you have already written your prospectus or your proposal, you've gotten approval on it. Maybe you have already published papers, but that's something different. So drafting is a kind of writing that's taking ideas and beginning to organize them. So you'll also see that under drafting on here, I've got draft around what you don't know. How do you do that? This is another writer's trick that helps you to avoid writer's block or blocks to your writing during that phase by using techniques to leave blanks. And if you are not using brackets, the little, they look like parentheses, but they're square. That's one of my favorite tools for drafting around what you don't know. So this is a way to keep yourself focused on what you're working on rather than getting distracted. So what I mean is if you're writing along and you realize, oh, I know there's an article that I read that's on this topic, or you remember reading it 2 weeks ago or whatever, rather than stopping your writing, stopping the flow of your activity as a writer, not the flow of your text, that's something different, but stopping, rather than doing that, don't stop, keep going. but use the brackets, and in the brackets, place a note to yourself. And in that note, you could say, find article read on October 25th, or whatever 2 weeks earlier would be. And that way, when you see that note again, you know where to look. But don't stop the writing to add in sources, formatted sources. For goodness sake, do not add in formatted sources while you're drafting. Notice where that comes into the writing process. It's in this editing phase. Now, to be clear, do connect what you're writing to the source, but you do not need to worry about formatting that material yet. So those are just some examples. And then of course there's meta revising, micro revising, and editing. I unfortunately don't have time in the scope of this presentation to go through that with you, but just by providing you with the writing process guide sheet where I've broken down each of these steps, I'm confident that you will be able to see what is called for, and what you can do to leverage your writing at each stage of the process. When I work with writers, I am pretty militant about having them not do things at the wrong stage. And what I mean by that is, as I said, maybe citation formatting. That is a thing you don't want to do too early, because a lot of the times you'll end up not using that source. It won't make it in. Maybe it goes into your references or your bibliography, but it's not in your text. So that's again a different kind of writing. By segmenting what you're doing and why, according to where you are in your process, you have a better chance at succeeding at moving your project along. That said, again, another caveat, you're probably working with advisors and dissertation directors who are not experts in writing. I'm not saying that to disparage them. Their specialization is in a subject area. Their specialization may not be in understanding how best to guide you to write. I know a lot of faculty say, publish 3 papers and then write an introduction. Well, that's great if every published article that you have written somehow miraculously works perfectly with your larger project for a dissertation. That would be great. But finding a way to thread those together sometimes can cause writer's block, because it's not clear, there's nuances, maybe there was a different methodology for one article, maybe it was a co-authored article, maybe it was a conference poster that never really got fully worked out. So there's all kinds of reasons that the material itself can be a practical impediment to your writing. So just be aware of that, and understand that your well-intentioned and excellent subject area specialists may not be your best allies in understanding what you need to do to adjust that writing project. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the UC Davis Writing Across the Curriculum resources and all of the supports that there are for graduate students working on their writing. Okay, so to recap, practical solutions. Know where you are in the writing process so that you can apply the right task at the right time. Okay, RIGHT. And it's not that there's necessarily a wrong thing to do, but there's an optimal thing to do. And what's optimal at one phase could be completely debilitating or limiting at another phase. So take that writing process seriously, and know how to manage yourself in that process. And that's one of the things I'll cover in managing large projects. But okay, secondarily, identify for yourself what is good enough. And you may see this, park it. What is that? I will show you how to park your dissertation. And PARC is an acronym that I created. It synthesizes common concepts in writing pedagogy, and it refers to your purpose, your audience, your role as the writer, and the context in which you are writing that document or the requirements of that document. And then lastly, claiming what motivates you to finish. That's a way of leveraging your productivity and really eliminating writer's block. So what's a good enough dissertation for you? Decide what your dissertation's purpose is. And this is an example of parking a document. So what is the purpose of your dissertation? If you can get it into a phrase that starts with a verb, to show, to impact, to change, to influence. It's not saying the what of your dissertation. It's kind of getting at why, the why behind the what. And by that, I mean, why does this dissertation need to be written? So asking yourself, what is the benefit of this dissertation? And getting that written down is another way that you can leverage your motivation. I talked about audience. Who are the readers of your dissertation? Typically, it's an audience of 3. Yes, I know it will be published and it will be accessible and it may be used for your job search. I understand that. Again, there are strategic ways to think about which segments of your dissertation will likely be read by other readers or things of this sort. So again, I'm speaking generally. You may have a situation where you say, oh, Wrye, you're completely wrong on this. And that's possible. You may have a designated audience that's waiting in the sidelines for you to publish your dissertation so that they can, save the world, which that's a good thing, and I think that there are many ways to save the world, but think practically when you are considering who your audience is. Your role. Consider your role more gently. You're an emerging scholar. You're not yet an established scholar. Think about what your aim is in that role, and that can again support you in understanding what not to get hung up on and free yourself in completing this project. The dissertation context has to do with what's going on in the larger context of your dissertation. How will it fit with information? How will it be received by your discourse community? What are their expectations for things like formatting, citation style, use of tables, no use of tables, paragraphing, headings, subheadings, lists? All of that can be studied by looking at published dissertations in your field or asking your advisor for samples that they have overseen. That's another excellent way to find out what are you really talking about. Another example would be, how many pages does your dissertation need to be? If you put that into a practical number that you can put on a Post-it and tell yourself, okay, this chapter needs to be this many pages, minimum, good enough, then it can put into perspective what you're probably doing is. And many people overwrite because they haven't thought about how many practical pages or paragraphs they need to produce. What is your life park? What is your purpose? What motivates you? And this could be in relation to your project. It could be how your project fits into your larger life goals. And so what gives you meaning is your purpose. I recommend doing a dissertation purpose and getting it somewhere in front of you where you work regularly or will see it, and your life purpose, writing down who matters to you. Who is your life audience? Who are you trying to engage with or, please? Is it a spouse? Is it your children? Is it a significant other? Is it your pet? It can be any person or animal that keeps you motivated, who's your ally in this project, because you do need personal allies. And if you are finding or feeling isolated, again, I encourage you to reach out to the people who will support you in this. And if that's your dissertation advisor, that's great. If it's not an advisor, working with peers and really having a support network who are your audience, they're in your camp. How do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And this bleeds into context. Where do you see yourself? Geographically, professionally? Visualizing that future can help you to overcome writer's block because you have a reason. You have the motivating factors that will support you in this long haul. Recognize what is preventing you. Is it a practical problem, or is it some sort of emotional baggage about the project itself? Use positive emotions to draw you forward in this process. Resolve what's not working. So whatever it takes to resolve it, these are practical ways that you can start to address the things that are keeping you or preventing you from getting to the writing. Because in order to write, you do have to have kind of a clear mind. And I hope the 5-minute focused free writing gave you a little taste of that you can begin to have a clear mind, set up some time to write with focus. And that was a particular kind of writing. Obviously, it's a different kind of writing when you're drawing from sources, but setting up that clear mind so that you can concentrate and get this done. And then lastly, implementing those new habits, using writing as a process and taking into consideration that not all writing is the same kind, nor does the time that you devote to it necessarily need to be a big chunk of time. It could be short and sort of staccato episodes to get you into a habit that supports you as you implement these new ways of committing to your project. And lastly, mobilize those motivators, whether they're life motivators or whether they're professional motivators, but you have to have something that will sustain you so that you have a reason to overcome some of the impediments. So I think I'm wrapping up. I've gone through these. I just went through them again. You'll have access to these slides, I'm sure, after the presentation. And now with the remaining time, I would ask that you please complete this survey and let me see how I can get that into the chat.
I just did, Wrye. I dropped it.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Great support. Thank you for being there.